Canaveral. They were expected to get a NASA crew quarters tour, which is happening right now. Then they'll get a tour of the Orion capsules nearby. Then they will get a demonstration of the Spacex for the launch briefing, and that will then take them away from the Neil Armstrong Operations Center, where they will head en route to the Operational Support Building, and right around that time, we should see, 4:33 East Coast time. We'll see the launch of SpaceX. Republican Congressman Michael Waltz is with me now from Cape Canaveral. Part of his district touches the northern part of that district down there. And sir, as we're watching here, we may get interrupted here, but you flew down on Air Force One, and now you're back home, literally. How's it feel to you today?
Well, this is just an exciting, amazing day. You know, the last time we had the president here was for the Daytona 500 with the Beast circling the track. And I just have to say, in this part of Florida, it's NASCAR and it's NASA. You know, that's in our DNA. And the entire state,
I'll have to turn this up.
The Space Coast is just fired up for this historic day, and to have the president and the vice president here.
You know, we are not alone on this. Many other governments and countries are trying to do it. India wants to go to the moon, literally put a man back on the moon. The Chinese are getting quite inventive in the ways that they have sought to pursue space as well. How important is today in setting that tone, setting that pace, do you believe?
So it's critical in two places. One, you know, we should realize and all appreciate our entire modern economy, agriculture, finance, global logistics, of course telecommunication, all depends on what we have in our infrastructure up in space. So it is critical that we maintain our leadership and our dominance in space. But to your point, we're no longer alone up there. The Chinese in particular have gone from about a dozen satellites to several hundred in the last couple of years. Bill, they actually have a satellite circling the moon right now with a Chinese unmanned rover on the backside of the moon. They intend to put their own space station up separate from ours, their own manned station on the moon, manned by the Chinese military, separate from us. So this has national security implications. The president's leadership, the vice president's leadership has been absolutely critical. Just a few years ago, the space shuttle program was completely moribund and dead. Now we have this launch today on the civilian side. We have the Space Force on the military side. This is, you know, this is just true leadership from our commander-in-chief, and we're just thrilled to have him here today with us.
You know, you're on that committee in the House that oversees Space Force. How will that change America?
Well, you know, to my point, in terms of our dependency economically, the Chinese and the Russians know that. They've developed the capabilities, the anti-satellite capabilities, cyber capabilities, and others to take that infrastructure out. So number one, the Space Force has to defend it. And then number two, we have to be able to put theirs at risk for a type of détente in space. Look, Bill, in all of the war games now, the first shots are actually fired up in space. And we have to have the ability to protect ourselves, to protect our economy and our way of life. And what's so critical, as I know a number of your commentators have said, after today we'll be no longer dependent on the Russians, as we have been the last decade, to put our astronauts up into space. And when I talked to the president about it, he said, never again. Never again will America be dependent on the Russians or anybody else to be number one up in space.
If you can defend your satellites, you can win, ultimately, if it comes to that. Have you ever seen SpaceX launch yet? Is this your first time for this Falcon 9?
Well, they've been launching actually for years now, but it's all been cargo missions.
But have you seen it? Because, you know, the rocket comes off and
everybody
drifts back down to Earth and it lands and you use the thing again.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
Well, that's the other thing. That's the other thing about today is this is a real celebration of entrepreneurship. This was just an idea in Elon Musk's head 15 years ago, and frankly, the engineers and the government and others laughed him out of the room. That not only would he be able to do this as a private sector company, but that he'd be able to then launch or land the rockets not just on Earth but on a barge. But that's how we're making it cheaper. That's how we're going to be able to get the amount of launches that we need to actually be able to not only man stations on the moon, but to get to Mars. We have to have that efficiency that only the private sector can bring. So it's that public-private partnership that's so critical. NASA's had a lot of oversight. All the safety checks have been done, but it's really the innovation of entrepreneurship in the private sector that's that's also to be celebrated today.
Thank you, Michael. Michael Waltz, there, Congressman from Florida, back home in Florida with us now. Thank you, sir. Let's make it work. Rick Ragmuth is watching the weather, chief meteorologist. How does it look so far? NASA says it's a go. What do you see?
You know what? It's looking a little bit better. It's been a really rough couple of hours. There was a tornado warning just to the north of Cape Canaveral about an hour and a half ago. So really rough weather. Take a look at the maps and I'll show you what's going on. There's a lot of moisture in the air. Some of this moisture is kind of moisture that's being pulled up into what became Tropical Storm Bertha early this morning. You get an idea here. There's a lot of moisture across the eastern part of Florida, but the bulk of it now is just moving offshore. That said, there's a couple of storms back behind it. See those storms that are just around the Orlando area and to the south of Orlando? Those are the ones that potentially could be in the area of Cape Canaveral in just about an hour. You see that incredible amount of lightning? That's obviously problematic. We'll see what happens if these storms that are off just to the southwest of it get up to the area. Officially, the forecast is calling for some scattered showers and some thunderstorms in the area at this time. But that's the official forecast. What actually, at this point, we're just doing kind of a minute-by-minute forecasting. We had a tropical storm that formed and made landfall this morning, Bill, and that was Bertha. That's pulling off towards the north, but that rotation is what continues to pull some of that moisture way off to the south here, right across that eastern side of Florida. So I think we're looking better than we were about an hour ago, but there are still storms in the area. So I'm hopeful because the worst of it is gone, but we can't completely say where we're going.
As are we. Thank you, Rick. Nice to see you. Rick Ragmuth. I want to bring in my colleague, Martha McCallum, host of The Story. And Martha, good afternoon.